I'm so pleased to introduce restaurateur extraordinaire Martha Hoover. Martha is a former sex crimes prosecutor that opened her first restaurant back in 1989 with zero experience in the industry. I invited her to chat because she's broken all the rules from day one. She helped pioneer farm-to-table dining, has provided unparalleled compensation packages to her team, and charged accordingly for both. Today, she runs an empire spanning more than a dozen locations. Welcome, Martha.
Thank you, Josh. And thank you also for all you do representing the restaurant industry and the changes that need to happen. I really appreciate what you bring to the conversation.
Martha, you know I'm a glutton for flattery. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Josh Kopel. I'm a Michelin-rated restaurateur who spent the last 18 months talking about running restaurants instead of running them. I've done this with a singular goal in mind, to figure out if there's a recipe for guaranteed success in the restaurant industry. I also host Full Comp, a podcast that airs twice weekly, unpacking the tools, tactics, and strategies of our industry's leaders. It's a selfish endeavor. I have the privilege of talking to the folks I idolize, and I ask only the questions I want to ask. The town hall is your turn. Today, Martha Hoover will answer the questions you've asked, and I encourage you to use the chat function to ask questions throughout the conversation if there's anything you want to dig deeper on. We're also leaving time at the end for live Q&A. With that being said, thank you so much for being here, Martha. Are you ready to get started?
Let's go.
All right, let me share my screen. Let's party. Here we go. Share. And there we are. So the first question is, how are you handling the labor shortage?
Oh, gosh. Okay. I know that's top of everyone's list of questions right now. The truth of the matter is, since 1989, we have dealt with labor shortage. And we have never been fully loaded as a company. But coming out of COVID, we have been in a really great position. For the first, I want to just mention this. I'm sorry, I got a little tongue-tied. We have been short on staff since day one, kind of on purpose. Not because we like to stress out our staff, not because it's not part of our business strategy, but we really believe in hiring talent over sheer bodies. And we take a lot of time in my company to interview people to make sure that they are good cultural fits. Our training takes a long time, months. In fact, we're not somebody who hires the first body who applies for a job and puts them on the line or puts them in the field right away. We put a ton of resourcing into how we hire and what we do with staff. Coming out of COVID, we were in a really remarkable position, and we retained about 350 of our 400 employees, of our pre-COVID 400 employees. And we had an insane amount of staff loyalty going into COVID, and that resulted in staff loyalty coming out of COVID, which allowed us to open up almost as if we had been operating when we closed. I think the reason we had such loyalty was because of the intense work that we have done since 1989 to create a really healthy corporate culture that treats people with dignity and respect, allow them to have opportunities for advancement, potential for growth, and gives them a real life, an opportunity at life unknown in the restaurant world. We also treat all of our positions truly like they're professional positions. We hire very serious people, and we have some expectations and demands of employment, but those beyond that, we also tell our employers what they can demand from us and what they can expect from us. And it's that exchange of values that has really given us a step up, especially right now in this crazy labor market that we are in. We are still attracting people, and we attract people not necessarily, we pay at the top of the pay scale for our market, especially for the category of restaurants that we are in, but it's more than just how we pay people. It's also more than just how we treat people. It's really the connection that we make and the engagement that we have with our staff that has really saved us coming out of COVID.
I think a through line because you and I have had previous conversations, and I think a through line through all of your success has been personal responsibility. You don't look at the labor shortage and see it as the result of something external to the industry. You look at it as something that was born in and caused by the industry. And when you look at your own business and taking that same personal responsibility, you've been able to create a culture and create this bubble, this environment whereby you're able to flourish regardless of what's going on in the world.
We set out as a goal years ago to make Pas de Choux as a company the restaurant group of choice in the market in which we reside. The restaurant group of choice for consumers, for customers, but also the restaurant group of choice for employees, I'm sorry. We want people to think by the time they get to Pas de Choux as an employer, that they have reached the holy grail of restaurant employment. And that's what happens. When you treat people, look, we hire smart people. That doesn't mean people pass IQ tests, but they are smart and they are connected and they understand the vision of the company. They understand daily what we are trying to accomplish. And they also understand their role in what we're trying to accomplish. We're not a very hierarchical company. We've talked about ecosystem for over 10 years. How one part of the ecosystem is impacted negatively. That means the entire ecosystem is impacted negatively. And usually people do two things. They self-select in and they stay with us long-term, or they self-select out very quickly. Our turnover happens at about 3 months. And usually people decide at that 90-day period that we are not the right culture or right fit for them. There are a lot of people who just want a job and they don't want to deal with the expectations of excellence that we have. And as a result, they do select out, or they are selected out very quickly. But what happens in the exchange is that the people who stay with us understand that we offer more than transactional employment. We offer more than just a job. And, if you don't mind, I'd like to just talk real briefly about kind of our philosophy on giving people potential and opportunities for growth. We have, everyone thinks, for instance, of dishwashers as being the entry level, lowest level position in any restaurant. We treat dishwashers as kind of holy positions. It's hard. They're logistical geniuses. They also, our dishwashing team knows more about waste than any other employee in our building. They know more about waste than our CPA and our financial team knows. They live it every day and they report that to us every day. And we have dishwashers who are prideful about their position in the company because we treat them as logistical experts. We also give people opportunities. About 8 months ago, one of our location managers came to us and said, I really think that the company is lacking in not necessarily a wellness officer, but in a mental health advocate. And I would like to create that position for myself. We gave her the go-ahead. We put some money aside. We figured out the budget of what she needed to get some certification, to get education. And now in a month or two, we are launching her position as a mental health advocate, something that is really needed everywhere in the industry, but especially during COVID and out of COVID, we're all just so aware of the need. And we had somebody who was so talented and was doing such a good job and so connected with the company. We didn't want to lose her because her interests had gone from managing the daily, in a daily location, but to doing something with kind of a higher purpose, different purpose. And she's got that opportunity now. And that means to me that we will retain her talent, which, as everyone listening knows, in the restaurant world, the revolving door of bodies is a huge creator of waste. And
Absolutely.
especially coming out of COVID, no one can afford waste.
I couldn't agree with you more. It brings us to our next question, which is, outside of higher wages, how do you compensate your employees? And we've talked a lot about the ideology behind it, but practically speaking, what do you do in terms of healthcare and retirement and all of that? And then the other question everyone listening is going to have is, how can you afford to pay for those things?
Well, yes, we do. We have a really robust benefit package, and we have, prior to COVID, we have historically. A lot of this comes from the fact that, truthfully, I didn't come out of the restaurant world. So I did not know how toxic the restaurant world was when I started my own restaurant. I only knew that I wanted to create a company that I would want to work for. I didn't bring all these bad habits from restaurant world. One of the bad habits in restaurant world is not offering safety nets, not offering benefits, not offering engagement opportunities for growth, et cetera, to employees. How can we afford all the stuff we do? I'll tell you what, we charge it in our pricing. And that's really a mission, has become a mission of mine right now, is to talk very openly and very publicly about menu pricing and how false it is at every level of establishment in the restaurant world. And we've got to stop getting away from false menu pricing. It supports a system of oppression. And, I don't like to support systems of oppression. I didn't really know how to say it 32 years ago, but now I do. And our pricing is high. It's not high because of some artificial, it's high to the market, but it's truly not high. We are telling customers that we need to charge this in order to fulfill our mission. And our mission is to have shared prosperity and sustainability, long-term sustainability for the business, for the community, for our customers, and most importantly, for the people who work in the company. And you don't get to do that if you follow the business model of the most food for the cheapest amount of money. That model supports a system of oppression that comes on the back of the people who work in our community. And even kind of more interesting to me, because I don't think people really have realized this, but it also creates a tremendous amount, this false pricing model creates a tremendous amount of vulnerability to the restaurant owner. And I don't know how restaurants do it, making 4% profit, which, by the way, is the independent restaurant average in the United States. 4% profit is considered a decent profit level. That might put money in the owner's pocket a little, but it does nothing, as everyone has learned, during emergencies. And COVID was that huge emergency, but I've lived through other emergencies that made me realize that in order to protect the vulnerability of my staff, I had to also protect the vulnerabilities of my company. And the only way I could do it was to charge honest pricing.
And we're going to unpack that in a bit, but I think the next question really speaks to that as well, which is, how do you execute your price increases? And talk to me about staff training and guest messaging, because I think that in large part, the reason that we as an industry don't charge what we should is the avoidance of that conversation, right? Having that conversation with our team, having that conversation with our guests, forcing our team to have that conversation with our guests. Talk to me about the approach you've taken there.
You know, no one wants to ever talk about money. I don't know how you grew up, but I grew up in a family where money was a taboo topic. But I find that the more you discuss it, especially with the teams, the more they understand the vital nature of a business making a profit. Profits are not dirty in and of themselves. In fact, it's what allows us to have all these great programs and benefits. It what allows us to keep up with our premises. It's what allows us to do training for staff and do, you know, have travel experiences for staff so that we can broaden our horizons. It's what allows us to grow our business, and also what allows us to get to weather these storms that happen. We talk very openly about it, and we are unapologetic about what we charge. We define our experience of our guests much differently than the normal restaurant does. We do not discount our food. We do not give away things, even to local charities that ask us. I don't know how many restaurateurs out there have this, but we're not alone, where we get calls for free food for someone's charitable event. And they always say, you know, the quid pro quo is that you're going to be reaching this audience. I'm like, I can't afford free. No one can afford free. And what we discovered a long time ago, and what we know to be fact coming out of COVID, is that where you give away your product, whether it's by not properly pricing it and not being unapologetic about how you price your product, what you're doing is you are devaluing your own worth, the worth of your company, the worth of the people that work there, and the worth of your product. And of course, food is at every level is an industry, not just the restaurant industry, but food large is an industry where everyone, as I mentioned, the paradigm for success is the most for the least amount of money in our country. And the problem with that is when you have an industry that is based on that alone, it automatically devalues the product and the people who are responsible for growing, nurturing, cultivating, creating, making, serving, distributing, whatever. And I just refuse to be part of that business model. And I have said since day one to my customers, the value you get from eating at my company is X, Y, and Z. The value is transparency on ingredients. I am going to tell you, and I'm going to be honest with what I'm serving you, number one. Number two, look at my premises. They're in really clean, pristine condition. Thirdly, look what we do for our staff. These are not just nameless, you know, invisible people. These are people with dreams of their own, goals of their own, lives of their own. And these are professionals who deserve to be paid professional wages and salaries. And of course, we also say we want to contribute to our community at large. And we cannot do that if you, the customer, is devaluing our product and the way we do it. And luckily, because we back up what we say by treating our food, you know, we really believe in the sacredness of our business, the sacredness of our spaces, the sacredness of our relationship with our customer, relationships with our people, with our premises, with our community. And we talk about it nonstop in every message that we do. There is a bit of a code of conduct that we talk about very openly to customers and staff alike. And we don't really treat customers and staff very differently in terms of this code of conduct. So to answer, I'm sorry, this is very long-winded and
No, I'm riveted.
non-direct. It's just, this is what we have been since day one. And, you know, there are customers who think that we are very expensive. What we try to do with each time they come into the cafe is to give them compelling reasons for them to understand that the value is much more than this huge amount of food that they walk away with. And luckily, most of our customers understand. They may not be able to come in twice a day. They may not be able to come in weekly, but when they come in, we will deliver exactly what we've promised to deliver them.
Well, and something that I would like to highlight for the people listening that might think, oh my God, Martha Hoover doesn't give money to local soccer teams, is in making the choice to not give things away for free, you've also built out a massive charitable arm of your own organization. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So, restaurants are called upon to do so much. We're not only are huge employers, we are, restaurants, everyone knows restaurants change neighborhoods, they change cities, they create levels of sophistication, levels of buzz. Every city wants to be the next food town. None of this comes for free. And we are very involved in our community, have been since day one. And as the company got more secure, more stable, more profitable, our level of giving grew as well. It's always been part of our DNA. I think most people in the restaurant world would agree that giving is part of their DNA. But what I found at the end of every giving cycle, at the end of every year, I would look back on what the company had done. And there were really three problems with it. First and foremost, the amount of money as it grew that we were donating in our very own community. That amount of money, we didn't see what our impact of our dollars were. That was really disturbing, Secondly, we couldn't really it didn't make an impact on butts and seats. You do these things to connect with your customer base, and we were all over the place, and customers didn't really have a clear idea of what we were doing. They knew we were charitable, but they didn't understand to what level. And then thirdly, the thing that was really distressing to me is I was getting all the glory and fame and credit for, writing checks. But if it weren't for the people in my company who make my company's success possible, I would not be able to write the checks. And not only did our giving not relate to them, it didn't give them the credit that they deserved. We are nothing if not total control freaks. And I really mean that. And when I say that, I remember years ago in personal therapy, I said, I don't mind being a control freak. I know that's horrible. I'm not abusive. I just have certain standards that I'm not willing to not live by. And that's my personal life and in my professional life. And we are nothing if not total control freaks in my restaurant world. And we felt that it was really wrong for us to give money and not make a true impact. We decided that we would be better off controlling our own destiny. So we created a not-for-profit called the Parachute Foundation 7 years ago, and kind of weaving back to this opportunity for people. We had somebody on staff, I'll use his name, I think he's listening, Matthew Feltrop. Matthew started out with the company 7 years ago, and he started out as a part-time host who was applying to get into our management pipeline. He had been a high school teacher. He wanted a change in career. Within 3 weeks of working for the company, he kind of began stalking me at our production kitchen and office. And I did sit down and meet with him. And he said to me, I think I'm in the wrong place. I think I'm in the wrong position. I think I'd be better suited based on my skill set to work in the foundation. Well, he is now our executive director of the Parachute Foundation. He has been for the last 6.5 years. He's a Bloomberg scholar, earning his master's in public health from Johns Hopkins. And he was recently named 40 under 40 in philanthropy by Forbes. So yes, it's not just us throwing these ideas out there. what I have found is it is critically important for us to have a values aligned organization. So we don't say anything in a vacuum that we cannot back up. So the community piece ended up to be the Parachute Foundation. And it's something that has, can I talk about it for one more second?
Absolutely, please.
It really reverberates with staff. They're very connected. They are involved, zero obligation to be involved. Our customers are very involved as well. Before COVID, we were serving about 2,000 meals a week to children in our community who live with pervasive food insecurity, fancy term for hunger, through the Indianapolis public school systems. On March 16th, the day that we were mandated to close by the state of Indiana due to COVID, our Indianapolis public schools were also mandated to close. And that week, while we were closing 14 restaurants, we also went into hyperdrive at the foundation level. Our service went from about 1,500 meals the week prior to March 16th to March 16th. The week of March 16th, we started serving between 9,000 and 10,000 meals. So that's what we do ostensibly. We serve meals, but we have other programs that I think are even more impactful, because we realized as a result of COVID, we realized so much, right, Josh, as a result of COVID.
Oh, of course.
Oh my gosh. And one of the things that we realized was that feeding children was a Band-Aid approach to solving the root causes of hunger, and that we needed to really take a step back and figure out what our true goal was. And if our goal was to uproot hunger and the reasons for it in our community, we needed to look at hunger in a completely innovative way. The mantra, the tagline for the company is that we're radically different and radically better in 5 different areas. One of them is this connection to our community. And that gives us a lot of freedom to come up with innovative solutions. So what we have done is, I'm very proud of what we've done. We have created a Food Fellows program, a paid internship for high school juniors and seniors who believe that they want to be somewhere in the food ecosystem, not necessarily working in a restaurant, but somewhere in food. We started a paid food internship program through the foundation. 100% of our fellows to date have found careers in food, have been accepted to colleges, and 100% of them have received 100% financial backing for their education. I'm very proud of that. We also have started a school food model called Pot of School, which is a neighborhood-focused model on how to reinvigorate the school food system within our own city. And it's complicated, and I'd love to talk about it, but I know you have a couple of other questions. So maybe another time we can talk only about the Parachute Foundation.
I would love to, but it's the reason I wanted you to talk about it is because I think it provides amazing context. I mean, it's, as someone that had 3 restaurants under his belt, I could barely keep up, and you've managed to build out such an amazing infrastructure. I'm curious to know, I want to skip through a couple of these questions because there's some really, really good ones.
But you know what? The infrastructure did not happen overnight. And
Sure.
we also, I'm a huge believer in smart, strategic, but slow growth. I'm not one of these restaurateurs that has venture behind her. I don't have huge capital. We don't make a move forward until we know that we are very on solid ground in every other way. So that, yes, I have a lot of restaurants and a lot of staff. We have an incredible infrastructure, but it evolves at all time. And I think that's what's critical for us, especially coming out of COVID, is our ability not to pivot, but to evolve.
Yeah. Well, and let's talk about that because I'd love to get granular with you and talk
Yeah.
about some of the common mistakes that you see restaurateurs making.
Well, I think COVID put like not a flashlight, but a floodlight on what I think is the biggest issue for restaurateurs is that they do not, most restaurateurs I know do not truly understand the difference between profit and cash flow. And I think COVID showed them how not profitable they truly were, or it showed them how thinly profitable they were and the dangers of being thinly profitable. There is nothing evil about profit, as we talked about a few minutes ago. And you have to truly understand the numbers. You know, people get very focused. I think the last 10 or 15 years with, you know, Food Network and celebrity chefs and Instagram and all this stuff, people are extremely focused and extremely wedded to this romantic ideal of the plate and the art behind the plate. And I love it. I love food. I love food culture. I love to eat. But anyone in the restaurant world who is attached to that notion is doing their business, their industry, their employees, and themselves a huge disservice. Restaurants are first and foremost businesses. They are businesses that exist in a capitalistic society. And you have to understand every quarter inch of your ecosystem in its operations and understand the money that comes in and the money that goes out. And if you don't understand that, you are creating yourself, you're creating a situation that is not going to be sustainable. I think, unfortunately, to answer your question, another mistake that I see most restaurateurs is that they are going backwards to old habits. Everyone's busy now. I have talked to nobody, my restaurant colleagues around the country are all telling me these, you know, patting themselves on the back coming out of COVID, extremely busier than they've ever been, a variety of reasons. And I'm like, I'm happy. We're all busy. People love restaurants. Restaurant world is back. First off, you can never make up for the losses that we had. And I think that those losses have to be mourned. I really mean that. And you have to go through that a process, basically, which is what we did. We understood that we could never, even future positive business that's better than it was 2 years ago or 3 years ago, will not make up for what we lost. But truthfully, what bothers me is that culturally, I think we're sliding backwards. I think people are back into old habits of toxic practices. I think consumers have kind of forgotten how vulnerable restaurants were and what was happening a year and a half ago. And they think just because everyone's busy now, that things are back to normal. I don't know. What do you think? You're a huge observer of restaurant world. Do you agree with me or disagree that we're kind of stuck in status quo when we had this great opportunity coming out of COVID to make some huge cultural changes in this industry?
I mean, candidly, I'm absolutely devastated. I look at the evolutions, especially in technology, that we've all decided to go back and forsake. I was at a restaurant over the weekend that at the outset of the meal handed me a menu and a QR code. And I don't understand the purpose. It's you can capture so much data with a QR code. You're saving so much money on paper and ink. You're able to adjust that menu in real time and collect data. And there are countless opportunities that we could have capitalized on. We could have all reopened with higher prices and
You know
just said,
what?
sorry, this is the cost of doing business today.
That's what we did. We opened up with higher prices and we put for lack of a better word, a disclaimer. Again, I'm unapologetic about this. We put language on our menus that said our prices reflect our mission of creating shared, oh gosh, what am I thinking of? Oh, hold on, I have the word, shared prosperity. I'm sorry, I got tongue tied. Shared prosperity for the people who work in our four walls. People have to understand that we are light years. We are so behind in the restaurant industry. You cannot tell me, I mean, here's an Apple phone. They charge $1,000 for a phone. No one blinks an eye. You know how much how much Apple makes a year. Everyone applauds them. Everyone applauds billionaire culture. But at the same time, you resent as customers the fact that your latte is $1 more, or the fact that your sandwich or salad, your entree is $2 more. I can't live in a world like that. So we decided that and in fact, we are raising our prices October 1. Why are we raising our prices October 1? Since June of 2021, our pricing has gone up overall for all of our food costs 32%. We can't make those numbers up. Inflation is here. The food system is broken and it's expensive. It's more expensive than it has ever been historically. And I don't know any consumer who could really believe in their heart or in their brain that restaurants do not deserve to charge more. And we're just, we are saying it out loud and proudly. This is what we're doing.
Absolutely. A next question would be about checks and balances. What systems do you have in place for maintaining your quality standards? Because your quality standards are through the roof.
Yeah. Well, first off, I have the benefit of all my restaurants being within short driving distance of each other. And I've got a very dedicated and involved executive team, including a culinary team. And we do site visits. We eat our own food, and we know what our food's supposed to look like and taste like. And that's a critical check and balance system. We also really monitor our waste, and we're honest about our waste. Every comp, every void, everything that gets thrown out, we take into consideration, because waste is the difference usually between us being profitable or not profitable. So we really control, as we try to put in as many systems control as we have. But in terms of truly maintaining our high quality standards, we have another thing on all of our QR codes, on all of our website. It's called Telehuman. And it is a dedicated email address that comes directly to me, that customers have. We have this on graphics everywhere in the restaurant, so people know. If they have a problem with our facilities, our service, the quality of our food, they have direct line to me. And in real time, they get a response. Most people, this thing that consumers have, especially in the age of social media, where they could complain on social media, but not complain in person, has always really vexed me. I'm like, tell me when I can actually correct something, because our purpose is not to ruin your day or ruin your meal. Our purpose is to deliver on that value that I was talking about earlier, to give you something compelling that makes you want to come back. Don't tell me after the fact 3 days later. Let me correct it in real time. And people do. People are embarrassed, I guess, to say something face-to-face to a server. We also have trained our staff. Read your table. If something goes out of the kitchen improperly, send it back. If something is not eaten at the table, find out what's wrong with it and make the correction when you have the chance. And so that's really what we do. It's a very hands-on approach, very simple.
You and I are completely aligned. I can't tell you how many times I said, like, if the dish drags, like, say something. Like, we can't ignore these lapses in service a lapse in service can't become a lapse in culture, you know?
Well, and truly, that's also, waste, that's also under the umbrella of waste.
Of course.
We talk about human waste, food waste, environmental waste. That is a waste of an experience. And that is an experience, a bad experience in a consumer's mind in the restaurant world gets blown out of proportion exponentially.
Absolutely.
And all it takes is someone saying, how may we make this better for you? And correcting it.
I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah.
For everybody that's listening, we are going to do a live Q&A at the end of this. So please be sure to populate the Q&A in the chat with the questions that you have. Emily is watching. Here's a question for someone with over a dozen restaurants. When did you know it was the right time to open another location?
Wow, that is, first off, that happened 30 years ago. So I have to really wreck my brain. My second location was, I've got to think,
Well, generally, what are the KPIs
generally,
you're
here's
looking
the thing. I decided to open a second and then third and then consecutive locations when I realized that my food, my menu, the style of my restaurant was being copied by competitors. That's what I used. And my thought process was, if someone's going to sabotage my numbers, let it be me. And that's the model I used to think about opening a second location. I will say, I will warn anybody, opening a second location is one of the most complicated decisions and complicated things you can do. Because generally, my experience has been, you don't have the right infrastructure and leadership team systems in place to open up number two, the way you do by the time you're open up number 5 or 6. And number two, to me, has to be done right and very strategically. I opened up number 2 too soon. And I think probably an ancillary question to when do you know is the right time to open a second location is, when do you know it's the right time to close the location? I think most people hang on way too long, creating all sorts of excuses as to why a location does not work. And usually those excuses, from my experience talking to other restaurateurs, is not looking inward as to what mistakes you've made, but blaming it on the location itself as opposed to whatever cracks in your walls exist. The locations for us that have not succeeded are usually locations where our infrastructure was not in the place it needed to be to support multiple teams. And that, I don't know if that really answered the question, but
Absolutely.
that's it, Yeah.
I think infrastructure is a huge thing. And then I have another one for you, which I think falls right in line with your core competency, what are 3 key points to keep in mind when branding and marketing? You are a branding and marketing queen.
Well, thank you. I think we are a branding. I think our branding really is successful because it is as values. It's all done within the values of the company, and we usually market about our values. And I have 5 different concepts under the Pas de Choux umbrella, and each concept has a different voice. And we allow separate identities and voices to be marketed. So Apocalypse Burger, it has a much different tone, a much different look, a much different demographic, much different, tone than a Cafe Pas de Choux, which has a much different demographic, tone, look. It's a market than a Petit Choux, a champagne bar and French bistro. So it's not one size fits all marketing. But what we have is a code of excellence that where all of our marketing, regardless of the tone and the voice, all of the marketing has to meet certain standards of excellence in terms of the graphics that we use. We have very spelled out, enunciated graphics, graphic standards. We have very spelled out, enunciated colors that we use and colors that are forbidden. I mean, I know that sounds granular, but that's how serious we are about our marketing. You know, authenticity is also critically important. You cannot make things up, because it's always that gap between what you say you are and what you are, that's where the real truth happens. And customers, they have a bullshit meter and they know that gap better than you do. So if you are not out there marketing what's true to your brand in the right tone, you are not doing a good job. You're also not doing a fair job to what you've created.
Rock solid advice. Emily, should we get started with the Q&A?
Sure. You guys have been doing such a fantastic job. You honestly answered a couple questions right as they were coming in, so I didn't have to jump in. One thing that we were talking about here in the questions was, when you expanded, did you decide to purchase or rent? And I think you guys can both probably give some insight on that, but I'll mute myself and sort some other questions while you tackle that.
You know, I am a great believer that I am a really good real estate operator, or not real estate, restaurant operator, but I'm not a real estate developer. And for the money that it takes me to buy property and build it out, I could open up 3 restaurants probably. And long-term, it's probably not the best advice, but short-term, it has allowed me to use my cash in the most efficient way possible. As I said earlier, I don't use other people's money. I still go to a bank, which means that I pay a bank back, and I cannot be frivolous. I find that when people are using other people's money, they are much less serious about where their money goes. And I've just never had that capability. I have to pay it back. I have to also show that my decisions are economically sound decisions. Now, I have made mistakes for sure in locations. I have closed restaurants, something that we don't talk about openly enough, because we're in this culture that you're not ever supposed to really admit to failure. But I'm not a real estate developer. I do not know how to manage real estate. I am a restaurateur, and I also believe in using, I like A spaces, and I like creating value for my company by opening up restaurants, not buying properties.
Yeah,
I've
I think that's
leased.
a good. Oh, go ahead, Josh.
Oh, I was just going to say, I've leased a bunch. I've never owned real estate. And the only actionable thing that I can share with the restaurant owners and operators listening is I will proceed in the future with far less optimism than I have had over the last 20 to 25 years. My lease rates have ranged from $6,000 a month to $21,000 a month. And in both cases, I was incredibly confident that I would make that rent. I would negotiate far more aggressively. And just like we've talked about, self-selecting employees and self-selecting patrons, I would argue that we can self-select landlords and say, either you're invested in my success or you aren't. And moving forward, either we win together or we lose together.
I know you told me I could cuss, and
yes,
not with reckless abandon. And I'm using this as my moment. Landlords are motherfuckers. And COVID brought that point home in the most horrific way. I have a variety of landlords, and I'm to the point where, to your point, Josh, I no longer want any position badly enough that I will subjugate the needs of my company to the whims of a landlord. Learning to say no to whatever the opportunity is needs to be the leading mantra when you go into any real estate deal. There are always other deals. I also refuse to talk about landlords anymore. They are merely property owners. They do not lord over me. They did during COVID. I really had difficulties. I had some landlords who were vicious to almost a allegorical, violent way. They did not care about me, my business, what I had built over the years. They didn't care about the community. They didn't care about my consumers or my staff. And, to your point, Josh, I am no longer getting in bed with those property owners. I just refuse to do business with them. And when I roll out of my leases, I will go elsewhere.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. There are a couple of really good questions in here that I wanted to share, which is, how do you cultivate the culture that you're talking about from day one, meaning newer restaurants that are just starting out? How do they effectively create that impactful culture?
Well, from an operational stance, our onboarding is complicated, and we have a department that actually onboards employees. When we open up new locations, we always use veteran staff, and we use veteran staff who truly embody our company's values. We also have an item that it's called Martha Book of Rules. I wrote it some 15 years ago. It has evolved, it is updated, not by me, it's updated by a committee of employees about once every 2 years. And it is our code of conduct that we teach to and we live by. And it does not matter where the location is or what the concept is, that code of conduct exists for every person in our company. And what we do to make sure that our culture is whole and stays aligned with the rest, what I'm talking about, is any red flag we address it quickly. And if someone is not a cultural fit, we do not allow them to stay on staff, because those non-cultural fits talk about waste. They create more waste in our system than anything. And, they create waste, they cause problems, they cause discontent, and there's no reason to think that they will improve, mainly because we give so much effort to our onboarding and our training. We know at the end of a 90-day period if someone's going to make it long-term. And as I mentioned earlier, long-term for us is, 6 or 7 years. Most of our employees stay with us for at least 7 years. We give them a welcoming, sacred space in which to work. I know everyone wants to talk about inclusion and all that. We love the concept, but we state it as sacred spaces, which are welcoming to all. And we're just disciplined in that way.
To talk numbers for a second, someone had asked, what's a target net profit for any one of your concepts?
Well, years ago, when I first started, it was, we were making net profit. This was kind of like where venture people get all excited, in the upper 20s. And that's when I was new to the industry. I was like, wow, I'm making a shit ton of money.
Everybody on the call just shit a brick. Everyone, myself included.
Okay, it's not what I make now. It's not what I make now. But there's a reason. I self-selected. I was like, you know what? I need to pay my people better. I need to do more for my community. 25%, 28% profit. Boy, that seems outrageous. And of course, a lot of us, because I didn't know what I was doing, I attacked prices on a menu thinking, I think an accountant told me I needed to make 30%. I was like, okay, I'll do that. It's not what I'm making now. But I make more than the national average. I make enough that we are not a vulnerable organization, vulnerable to things that happen. Not everyone's aware of the pandemic. We may never have one of those again in our lifetime. But you know what? We will have floods. We'll have labor shortages. We'll have tornadoes. We'll have political unrest. We'll have events that really impact our business. And if we can't weather those storms, we are in trouble. So I think that the range of profitability for us has to be north of 12%. And it depends, of course, on the concept. But what's more important to me is how we manage internally, how we manage our numbers, how we manage our payroll, our waste, our food and cost, our paper goods, our our director of operations has 2 major conversations with every manager of every location every week. And it's about our budgets and whether or not they are on target with their budgets. These are living documents, our budget, and we respond to them in real time. We do not wait for things to get bad before we address them. And we know what our target range for payroll should be, what our target range for profit should be, what our target range for resourcing should be, and our rents, and we just stick to our budgets. We are maniacal about that. And again, it goes to understanding your numbers.
I couldn't agree with you more. And it brings me to our final point, which is, I've talked in the past, and I've talked with you directly about this big lie that we're told is an industry, which is, we come up in this industry and, a restaurant can't be run like a traditional business. We abide by different rules. And it's this fallacy that is ingrained in all of us from our first days in the industry, that overtime is baked into how we do it, that margins have to be razor thin. I mean, I could go on and on and on. That there is no work-life balance in the industry, and you've managed to turn that entire model on its head. And can you just take a minute to talk about how a restaurant business can actually be run effectively like a business at scale?
I don't know how else it could be run. There is I don't have enough runway in my life left to run a business that ekes by. It is too uncomfortable, too stressful, and too painful. And I also think we've got so much available to us in terms of information. You mentioned technology. We triple down on our use of technology coming out of COVID. We really did. We said, for the first time in my now 32 years in the restaurant business, we need to understand the data that we have already at our fingertips. And we need to embrace any system that gives us better information about our ecosystem. And we can't just sit around and pray for a busy Saturday. We have to understand how a slow Monday is just as critically important to manage through as a busy Saturday. And we use technology. We use technology, which has been such a gift of our time, right? Of the time in which we exist. The only thing I can say, Josh, to your question is, I believe that all restaurateurs need to change their view of their menu pricing, the way they pay their staffing, and the way they devalue their own products. And instead of apologizing to consumers, we have to educate consumers, and that you have to educate them that this is critically important. Food, people in the food world, our product, our people, our places are significant to communities, and nothing happens by accident and nothing happens for free.
Ladies and gentlemen, Martha Hoover, the past, present, and future of the restaurant industry. Martha, thank you so much for taking the time to chat.
Josh,
I always learned so much. I mean, people are asking in the chat, please, can you send us the recording of this? Which, let me assure everyone, it will be available online. We'll send everyone a link to it. Martha, you're inspirational and aspirational and everything.
Thank you. Can I just mention one thing to people?
Please,
if they're
please,
at all
please.
interested, on our website, cafeparachute.com, parachuteinc.com, whatever. I believe in open information, and our Martha Book of Rules is there for anyone to use and adopt and adapt for their own business.
Amazing. We'll link to that too in the notes for this cast. Thank
Thank
you
you.
again, Martha. Thank you for everyone that attended. We'll see you next month at the next town hall.
Thank you. Bye, Josh.
Bye.